All right, you're live.
Okay. I will never forget the first big timber frame tool I sprung for. It was kind of, I didn't know if I should be investing in this kind of equipment. Would I be doing timber framing? And that tool will be forever burned into my mind. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Hello, I'm Bert, and I'm glad you're here with us. We're going to be talking about tools of the trade today. And this webinar just might be a vintage webinar. I don't know if you're ever going to see me again with a beard and a bald head. Crazy times call for crazy coping mechanisms, right? Just an attempt at a little humor. And so we've been having some fun with that. So today we're really going to get into, I'm going to share how I acquired tools, in what order, and also I'm going to share with you what the duds were, the good and the bad, and also a way to really know whether or not a tool was a good decision. Kind of just a real simple acid test that's become apparent through the years that I've been working. All right, so again, so here we are on the overview. Tools, how I acquired them, 4 big losers. Then we've got a bonus tip for you guys, or a bonus for you live viewers at the end of it, and then a follow-up question and answer. And for the question and answer, here's some questions that may kind of want to just kind of prime the pump for you, get you thinking. Can I get by with cheap tools? What are the factors to think about? How do you handle big beams on remote job sites? Cranes maybe not available. Are there any good sources for do-it-yourself timber framing? Like reviews? Do you know of anyone who rents tools? And how difficult should I expect my project to be? These are all questions that we can handle if you want to at the end. You're going to drive the bus. In the beginning was Bert. No, really, this was when I was framing contractor. I'd been in business about 5 years, maybe 7, maybe 8. And this was 2002. A client asked me to do some timber framing, just a porch with some dovetail lat joints. And I said, what's timber framing? And so he kind of waved his hands and talked. And I said, okay, well, let me think about that, I told him. And so I went to the library, I checked out some books on it, and started looking at it, and thought, wow, this could be a lot of fun. Basically, I just fell in love with it. So that was the beginning. And I had your basic carpentry tools for framing, all the skill saws, sawzalls, drills, nail guns. Well, nail guns don't really apply with timber framing, but the levels, lasers, all the goodies, right? All your basic construction carpentry tools. And so that was where I started. And so after I did that project for that client, I started looking, and the law of attraction kind of kicks in. And I found a few projects to do here and there. And I thought, I'd really like a cover over my pool. And I decided to timber frame a pool cover. And in doing this, this is what it would look like. And it's reclaimed material. So I was going for some finer joinery. And I also made it really tough on myself. I figured since this is a way to test the waters, that these hips right here do not run at a 45. It's about it's a 712 here on the body, but then on this portion right here, it's like an 8.1212. You might ask, well, where did that funny number come from? And really what it is, if you take a look here, on the back, you have posts, 5 posts with equal spacing, and a big space right here. And these post spacings match. Well, I wanted a girder truss right on the post. if I'd have made this a 45, it would have put this big girder truss out in here somewhere, which was a big load for that. And then on the kind of the other thing that just tipped me over the edge to make this an irregular pitch is that it would really challenge my trigonometry skills, visualization of triangles. Because it's so close to a 45, it really just screwed my head a lot. So it was kind of a big challenge to do that when you're looking at like 40 degrees and 50 degrees looking down on the flat. Early project, and for this project, we did not have any other timber frame tools. We did acquire a few, but it was during this project right here where I lost it and thought, man, I should buy this tool. And this tool was, do we have any guesses? Have any guesses come through? No guesses.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and take a guess. I'm going to hold that back a little bit. Take a guess. What was that first big tool? $3,800 in 2003 or whatever it was. All right. Take a guess at it. So it's one of these tools, and it is the mortising machine, chain mortiser. So the way this works is before we had this tool, you had to take a drill, a 2-inch wide bit, and drill down multiple holes to create a mortise and a bunch of chisel work, really slow. And this is called a chain mortiser. This chain is 1 inch wide, 2 inches with the bar and the thickness of the chain. And you'll see there's a stop right here. The chain always pulls in this direction. So you set your stop to the depth you want, and then your beam, your drop beam here. Your beam, you can just make a long mortise. You just keep chunking through. You just move it over. Takes about 2 seconds to get a hole that is really clean, except for the curve of the bottom. That's 2 inches by 1 inch. That's the first tool to get. Now, if you're doing this yourself, they do have some cheaper versions. I looked at them. There's a Makita. It kind of, what it does is it clamps to the beam, some clamp setup, and then you move the tool back and forth, and so it kind of sways like back and forth with a chain mortiser, but a lot of work, slow, and I just wanted something good. And it's kind of funny how my perception changes. Now I've had to do more office work and kind of be on the front end of getting the designs right for the guys. And the guys kind of start starving for tools, but then when I get out in the shop, it's like, you get a crappy tool or a tool that's not functioning, and it's like crazy. It's irritating. It just, wow. So if I'm out there, the boys love it because, hey, any request for a tool finds fertile ground, right? So that was one. Another one, we got a big stand-up bandsaw for cutting curves and arches, and that was a good tool. It is currently collecting dust right now, which dust is going to be kind of the judge and jury of whether or not you've made a good tool decision for purchasing a tool. If tools come out of the box first or out of the rig first, guys seem to grab those first, you've made a great choice. If on the other side, tools kind of collect dust and don't get used, or they're the last one out, that means that something's wrong, and it might not be a big difference, but it's not preferred. So, and kind of a real quick test, don't have to sweat it. So this was a critical and drill guide as well. So when we did this project right here, we didn't have a drill guide. And we came back and we marked these and drilled out the tenon as well as the post at the same time. We figured it would be quicker that way. And then we also drilled from both sides so that the hole would be exact on both sides. And, we fought that just back and forth. It's really tough to get those holes aligned. And the thing that stopped me from using the drill guide was the fear of having holes good on one side and coming out real wonky on the other. And so I made the decision to do it the hard way, kind of. But it turns out this is really close. Sometimes they'll wander a bit, but if you drill them out before you cut the mortise, so it's got solid wood all the way through, they tend to do all right. And it's just, I just reconcile myself to the fact that this might not be perfect on the other side, but just work on the face. It's most, public facing, and work it that way. Okay, and another thing that happened when we were early on in the tool acquisition process, and I didn't see these next two tools coming, the Gantry Crane as well as a forklift. My friend helped me here. So that was good. But this Gantry Crane, we kind of had our shop set up. We had this job that we were doing, and we pulled the trailer in through the shop, and the idea was to kind of get started. And right on top of this pile, the way the trailer was loaded was a huge, it was like an 8 by 16 by 30 foot long or something, just a big beam, and it's way up here. And I thought, yeah, we could get it down with manpower and do some ramps and whatever and slide it down, but I'm going to need something to move these big pieces anyway, or we're going to get hurt. So I had time on this. I didn't have to have the timbers done in a big hurry. So we went ahead and poured some channels. You'll see it in another photo. This Gantry Crane is just an I-beam with posts. It's got wheels down here. And it runs in a channel. It trundles back and forth up and down the shop with the trolley on the I-beam. And it's really so you got to have something to handle those big beams, because they get really, if you don't have equipment, it takes a lot of thinking, and it just complicates logistics, as well as, you've only got one back. You can't go to Safeway and buy another one, right? So that's a big deal there. And as far as material handling, a Gantry Crane really has one big benefit over a forklift, the little forklifts like you see running around in warehouses, in that the floor doesn't have to be absolutely clean. This can be like a helicopter, and it move in any direction and move material without moving sawhorses, boards, blocks, sawdust, etc. So that's something really good to think about. Now, it wasn't long after that, maybe 6 months, we were unloading with the Gantry Crane and pulling wood in and unloading with that. And we still had troubles with big trusses, trying to get those loaded. There's some crafty or creative rigging to get trusses loaded, and still you only got so much clearance at the top. And one of my friends came by, and he watched the whole process of us grunting and huffing and puffing and whatnot. And he says, "Bert, what are you doing? Get a forklift. I mean, come on." And he, preached the same thing about one back and all this. And I hung my head and said, "Yeah, you're right. Acquire a forklift. I recommend you do the same if this is going to be something you're going to do, or rent. It's worth having the right tools and the right equipment." Okay, and then of course, better beam saws. You really should have the word better. I had some sort of beam saws there, but we found out the beam saws that were working well. And what you really want to look for is a nice wide base, a solid base. They tend to bend over time with just the pull of the saw and getting set down and whatnot. And that's the part that you're trying to make a nice square cut. If the table's a little off, you can kind of get used to it and adjust, and your mind can compensate for a lot. But when you get a new one and it's just cut, something to behold. So here's the shop in action. And you can see the Gantry Crane runs the length of it. It's tough to see the little channel it runs on, but that material comes in, it works its way forward, gets assembled, goes and gets stained, and you can see the tools are laid out. The guys have done a great job with all this, figuring out where to place things. They got peg racks and just all the goodies. You see a drill guide here. Here's the straps and the trolley. And okay, so we've got a few more tools here. The power planer, we've got one that's 12 inches wide, as well as this is 7, as well as the little planers. And they come in handy. You can see here one beam came out a little bit wide. Just planing that down as it's coming together. And they're not heavily used, but used often enough. You want some good tools. And here we've got what's called, we call them nylon brushes. They're a Makita little tool. And it's like a wide, if you picture a wider wheel that spins like so, just like a belt sander. And it's not we found out that the nylon works better. It's really good for cleaning up beams, and if you spend enough time in one spot, it gives you the effect of sandblasting. Sandblasting by nature is when you see a piece of driftwood, you see all those ridges in that piece of driftwood, all the soft grain has been removed, and the layer that has the natural glue is really hard, and so that makes the ridge. So that's what this will do. Definitely worth having. And of course, we acquired a lot of different chisels, slicks, draw knives, all kinds of hand tools. Hand planers, not so much. That hasn't really, but hand saws for some cuts. And okay, this doesn't happen to be the Scriber. I missed this. This is a tool that we did acquire, and it is really handy for cleaning out joints. This is called, by the German brand, it's called a fine tool. Of course, this is a DeWalt. You can see the colors. But what this does is this little blade just goes back and forth, and you can take that and plunge it directly into a piece of wood. You can see here it's getting cut with cutting off a peg to a certain depth. The reason how it is. So I'm going to just go through these, and then I'm going to draw what the Scriber does. So I don't want to leave that one out. So the portaband is the reason that our original bandsaw is collecting dust. And I was aware of this tool for quite a few years, but I could not imagine this skinny little blade handling all the cross fibers of Doug fir and cutting wood in a decent amount of speed. And so I was late to the party getting this tool. This has been a good one. We now have 2 of them. And we've also got another one I'm going to share with you. One of the losers, okay? And of course, we got a bunch of chainsaws. Figured out which brands to buy. A bar that's somewhere around 20 inches is in the shop. It's really nice. Having one that comes down to a fine point. It's called a carving blade. It doesn't give back kicks, so if you're cleaning out a little mortise or doing a little nibbling on something hard to get, it's a rough tool. It's just for removing wood where you can safely do so, staying away from where the joinery counts. But the chainsaws too, for us, is you want a bunch of them. There's foul plugs, there's blades chains that aren't sharp, and man, when I'm on the go, I have to stop. Really is irritating. And then working with tools that aren't sharp, or that, or maybe the things are just kind of wonky with it, can be unsafe as well. Okay, so Scriber, let me clear this here. I'm just going to kind of just draw what a Scriber is. Some of you may know. So a Scriber is basically got an arm or a base, a couple arms that come out, and you've got a pencil or a pen that rotates in here. It's got a handle that comes out. And in this handle is a vial. And it tells you when you're level. So I'm going to mimic with my fingers. So here's the 2 markers. I've got a vial here that I would look at. I would set a distance with what I want to scribe, and it works really well for irregular surfaces. And then you just watch this vial plumb, and it'll move up and down, and you just keep that plumb, and it follows your marks. And you carve off all the up to the mark. It drops right down on whatever you're trying to fit. Logs, post to stone, we do a lot of that. Some really good applications with that. Scribing it's really fascinating. It's simple, but yet it's so simple. It's just really fascinating and rewarding to do it. And there's one, if you're working with angles, starting to scribe, that gets a little bit weird trying to keep all that straight, but it's a clear, clean concept that's pretty cool. So a scriber, if you're working with irregular surfaces, definitely. Okay, here's our losers. This right here is a portable bandsaw. It costs about a third of what the other one did that I showed you earlier. And we've got two of the good ones and one that kind of serves as a backup, but I think right now it's still missing parts and something's wrong and nobody's bothered to fix it because it collects dust. So we had a good one. This came across our radar. The good ones are around 6K. This was about 2.5. And so if you were looking at these in a store and you had them side by side, you would look at the cheap one and you say, well, it's a little bit heavier, but it's, it's got an on-off button. It kind of has a table and seems like it might work. And the other one, six grand, so quite a bit more, a little bit lighter. And you're kind of wondering what the difference is. The old adage, you get what you pay for, tends to be true most of the time. It was true in this case. With this right here, you could say we paid $2,500 for an education. And we do have a backup. I mean, things happen and you make decisions and move on, but you don't have to make that one. Spend the 6K if you're gonna be doing any type of volume. And even if you're not gonna do volume, I'd recommend buying the 6K one and then selling it because it'll be worth more than what you can get out of that. Okay, then we had a groove cutting tool. Okay, I think that was missed. So this one here is one of the losers. This was an underpowered groove cutting tool. Cut something about 1.25 inches wide by about 3/4 deep. It's got a dado set. It's a little 220 one. And we picked one up that was 110, thinking that, well, I think I found it on Craigslist or something. Well, 110 for job site and whatever. But it just cut so agonizingly slow. You're better off running multiple grooves with a skill saw than doing that. So underpowered, bad. A groove cutter is a tool that we did acquire. The good one is 220, nice squat little thing that just hogs out a groove. And we'll use that for mortises as well as wiring channels if on top of rafters and that sort of thing. This here is, this tool doesn't look so big. Some of you may be familiar with a Prozzy. It's an attachment that goes on a skill saw, and it's a chain just like this, a bar and a chain, and then you use your skill saw and it winds around. This is a 220, big German tool. I think this was about $6,000 too. It was a loser for us. 6,000. It's really a heavy tool. It doesn't, a picture, it's hard to tell what it is. This thing is big and unwieldy. It's probably about 25 pounds, and it's handy in that it'll go both ways to a high degree, like 60 degrees. So if you're taking a rafter cut or something, you're going to knock it off. It sounds like a winner, right? It's not, at least in our experience. This tool collects dust. Occasionally we use it for cutting an arch on a job site or different things. I mean, I really wouldn't sell it for what I could get for it, but I wouldn't spend the money again. And one of the things that's really, really challenging with this is it kicks dust up, a lot of dust. So you're always cleaning out for your marks to cut. And when you're cutting, I mean, you have a lot of tension. It takes a man and a beast to move this thing through wood. Ooh, it takes a lot of pressure, especially if you're ripping. Anyhow, don't recommend it. And then this last tool here is, this is a routing kit. And what it is, it's a setup that has these jigs, these aluminum jigs, and so on the end of a beam, what it does is it cuts out kind of a dovetail, and this has a bevel, and then so you end up with everything removed except for that piece right here. You get this dovetail cut out of the beam, and there's a matching one for the facing beam. You do these and they snap together. They snap together nice. It pulls tight, and then you just simply add your screws from the top. But we found out that for us, it's easier we just work better just to go ahead and create a full housing for that beam where they made up, than drawing it kind of from the back side. But anyway, just a full housing, it just sits in. And so this tool is collecting dust for us. For a lot of shops that are doing these plug and chug pergolas where they're just bapping them together and quick for a homeowner to install these kits, I think it's a great deal, and a lot of companies are using it. Hasn't worked out for us. So here's a little closer picture of, just a random tool that doesn't look super organized, but guys know where things are and it's handy. They figure things out. And your bills, clamps, sledges, mallets, all that's good stuff. They all collect. Now, two tools that have been a recent acquisition, which a lot of people might not get them, and some of you may be professionals that have all this and are just looking for a little bit of insight. I wouldn't guess that someone who's going to do their own project would invest in a sawmill. And if you're going to be doing much work with a sawmill, and you got to have this log loader. And the sawmill, sawing wood doesn't seem like it's rocket science, correct? Pretty easy deal with it, and so we kind of got into this a little bit naively. Had we known what we known, I think we would have still done this, because having the ability to cut wood, not have to wait for material, it's worth quite a bit. We had a mess up on a job recently, and there was a 10 by 24 by 37 foot long, and it had to be replaced. Now, without this mill, I would have just been up the creek without a paddle. I had to call a builder. We had a mistake, and what the good news is we'll be able to get a replacement beam in 8 weeks, not 10. And so that's really been helpful. And of course, if you're going to have logs, you have to have a way to deal with them safely. You can't be trying to put straps and forklift and whatnot. So, two acquisitions that have really made it nicer to service clients and just keep that shop pumping with wood.
And real quick, Taylor commented and said, thanks for the advice on tools to avoid. So if anyone else has anything to throw in. Okay,
Taylor just commented, said, thanks for the advice on tools to avoid.
And if people have any questions.
You got any questions? We're kind of getting close here. So this here is a project that happened kind of serendipity type of thing. That's a good word, isn't it? Serendipity. It kind of rolls off your tongue, guys. So you may have heard of the term that sitting is the new smoking. Anyway, a few years ago, Saturday morning, I was going to do some office work, and I got to thinking, cleaning up my desk, and thought, man, it'd be handy to stand up. So I said, I'm just going to run down to the scrap pile off the mill, find myself a couple wide planks, and just put together a quick and dirty desk to see if I actually use it. And so I was down there kicking around on the scrap pile, and this piece right here in particular, because of its width, it's 20 plus inches, kind of kept catching my eye, but it's a big herky piece. And then I was doing it, and I thought, hey, what if I just use that Scriber and get this all cleaned up and fit these, and it's got the curved edge on the bottom with the cedar, and these pieces were all there, and it was going to work. So I jumped into it, kind of hit flow state, cleaned things up, and 6 hours later, I was having my daughter help me lug this thing in. Is a green is probably 200, maybe 250 pounds. So not it's a stable unit. But the reason I bring this up is when you're doing your project, whatever kind of project you have in mind, it's going to do what this table did for me. When I look at that table, I have good memories attached to it. It's kind of fun to do, and it's kind of its unique little live edge piece of art there. And for me, it works good. I stand up more, and it's just kind of a little perk of joy when I see it, and it comes into my conscious mind. The same thing is going to happen with your project, whether it's big or small, and whether you're involved in it to a high degree or a lesser degree. It's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a couple of things that, as far as when you're going into your projects, action is good, but action with reflection and thinking is better. So let me explain what happened to a friend of my father's who had action without clear reflection. So this guy was a plumber, and all his, kind of just in the back of his head, he thought, once he retires, has a little more time to have a wood shop and create some knickknacks and some furniture, rocking chairs, that sort of thing. It'd be a lot of fun. So by and by, he did retire, and he did pretty good with his business. So he had the resources to get state-of-the-art tools and a nice shop and figure out ergonomic setup with efficient flow, and had a lot of fun setting it up and whatnot. And then fast forward 3 years, and he was selling all of his tools. And my father was kind of surprised. He said, well, hey, what's up with that? And the man answers, he says, Joe, if I would have been a woodworker at heart, I would have been out there years ago in some cramped, stuffy corner with inferior tools working on the wood. It sounded neat, but it's not really me. And I had to figure this out the expensive way. So I guess my exhortation to you is get started, start moving, but then back off and really figure out, are you leaning, your ladder of success, what you want to do, is it leaning on the right wall? Kind of tragic to chug up the ladder and spend all this money on tools and figure out that, this isn't what I want to do. So that's a big takeaway when you're thinking about these tools and all of that.
I have a question.
We've got a question.
A question from Mario Gattaca. I just got here a few minutes ago. Hello, everyone. As I heard, you do not recommend the drop dovetail joint instead of full house and then secure the whole joint with screws? ?
Correct. And your name was?
Mario.
Mario. Thank you, Mario. Yes, that the depth of the housing depends on the load of the adjoining timber member. But for us, it's worked out better to just cut out the whole housing, and we use the groove cutting tool to do that as well. That tool right here that you're referring to, it wasn't a cheap tool. This right here, I think the whole setup was, I don't know, it seemed like $6,000. I don't know why that sticks into my head. Maybe it's $5,000. But so, we've got it. Will we sell it? You want one, Mario? I don't know if there are times where it comes in handy for certain projects, but I don't know. We prefer the full housing. Does that answer your question?
And you tend to stay away from the drop dovetail?
Yeah, the drop dovetail is in part because of shrinkage, and then you leave so much of the connecting beam is left kind of hanging. Okay, so that was the leaning your ladder up against the wrong wall. We want to avoid that. And I'm going to share, we're kind of winding down, I'm going to share a personal happening that happened to me with my own project. Me being the cobbler, and me and my wife or family or house going without shoes. And it kind of relates to this whole thing about knowing what you want, as the story of the plumber with the woodworking. So what happened with me is I started a remodel project, tore out our front deck. My wife was after me for years to do this, that, you know, it's time to clean it up, whatever. And she kind of had an idea. And I thought about it, sketched up a few things, and okay, yeah, this will be cool. And as I was tearing out the deck and kind of working away on it, my father stopped by and, hey, what's going on? And I kind of, you know, pointed and waved and talked and explained what we were going to do. And he asked me a few questions that made me think, okay, I had a few things I hadn't thought of. And right then, I realized that ding, 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 the cobbler's children were going without shoes. In other words, when we do things, when anyone comes to the door wanting a project, I tell them that, look, whatever you're doing, people ask us to skip our 3D model. Can you just kind of do something or whatever? Exactly what I was doing without shoes. I tell them that, you know what, it's not worth it. You're going to be able to see it, modify it. You're going to get more ideas. You'll be able to make sure that you like it or don't like it. You can take that step back and reflect and see if that's what you really want. You're putting your ladder up against the correct wall. All of this. I've said that ad nauseum for many, many years. What was happening for myself? I wasn't giving myself the respect I should, maybe, not valuing it, thinking, good enough for poor people, right? And so I was chugging ahead without doing it. So I stopped and then delayed the project and eventually got around to it and figured it out and started to get ready to move again. And then, ding, 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 ding. I tell people also, with a remodel, whatever you're doing, let's try to get our hands around the grand plan. What are you trying to do overall, if there's anything else? So I then did things to the model, thought through things, came up with a lot of ideas to change the whole picture of what I was doing with the original entry project. So in the end, I did get my shoes on after 2 attempts, the cobbler's children, and put the feet on the child's feet, shoes on the child's feet. So that is, again, really figuring out what it is you're trying to achieve. And when you're doing these tools and doing all this, what it is you're trying to achieve is, you know, that fits into the whole thing. How much you invest in tools, how much of the work you do, whether you just get a package from someone like myself or someone else and do the install, or whether or not you want to just be really heavily involved in making decisions and design ideas. That's all your prerogative, and it all needs to align with where you want to go and how you want to get there. What kind of a process do you want? How much involvement do you want? And when you really understand that, it becomes easy to just knock it out of the park. And now our bonus. So part of understanding what you want and doing the timber frame is getting the right look and feel. And these two, book or the planning guide, all drive to that point, getting that right look and feel. What do you want? And so we're going to give you a choice. Reply with a chat, one or the other, the guide, or the second edition sneak preview of this book. And if you like the book, we're going to give it to you, no strings attached. If you like it, if it helps you, would ask that we get a review. We get a review for it, and there are going to be hardcovers. We're doing nothing but hardcovers, really cool. And if you would like an autographed one, when they do come, the launch is February 23rd. We can autograph it and sign it and send it out to you, and be glad to help you out in any way we can.
I put a link in the chat. Email Lucas at Arrow Timber to request it.
Okay, so we've got a link in the chat. Email Lucas at arrowtimber.com. L-U, here, always write it out. LUCAS at arrowtimber.com and say book in the subject line or guide. Simple as that. Now, I think we are up to our questions and answers. So I don't know if we've got any while we're waiting for a few questions here. I'm going to ask one trivia question. It's kind of fun. Back in the day, so colonial days and prior, when builders could get their hands on nails, where did they use the nails? Where did they use the nails? They're rare, they're hard to get, but they were available. They had to be beat by a blacksmith by hand. Where did they use them? Answer is they use them right in the front door. You may even have recalled old pictures of doors with a bunch of nails. Now, why would they use them in the front door? Well, if nails were a sign of wealth, you're not going to bury them in the roof unless it's absolutely necessary, right? You want to kind of show those babies off. That's where they're used, front door. Okay. So we've got 5 questions here. Before we get into it, do we have any questions other than that? Do we still have an audience?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll run through these. Can I get by with cheap tools? That is a question you have to answer. Like we just talked about, like we just covered. Where are you trying to go and what are you trying to do and how committed are you? If you're a professional, no, don't, never. Cheap tools and irritation that never quits. If you're just doing this one-time project, if you go with good tools and sell them, you're going to enjoy yourself more. You're going to hedge your bets to having a more enjoyable thing. But if it's just time and you're okay with that, doing something cheap might be the way to go. Kind of really what it is you want to do.
I have one question here.
Okay.
From Mario. Just one more question. I love everything that has to be with timber frame construction. Have you ever built any timber frame 2-floor timber house in a heavy earthquake place like Chile?
Okay, Mario. Are you in Chile, Mario?
Must be.
Okay, 2-story heavy timber frame house in a place that has prominent or has multiple earthquakes, such as Chile. California, I don't know if that's on the same scale for frequency of earthquakes. So I don't know that we have, Mario. On a prior webinar, we covered a little bit of that earthquake concept. And really briefly, an earthquake has a certain frequency, vibrations. So if your earthquakes in Chile tend to be, just let's say at this vibration, and you build a timber frame, if your timber frame can have a vibration when it's all built, has a vibration that's at a higher level than the earthquake, we'll put E for earthquake and we're going to put T for timber frame and T for timber frame down here. Or your timber frame has a lower vibration. When your earthquake comes through, as long as the frequencies don't match, the building will stand. It's good. But if the frequencies match, it's going to crumble. GM made a car. Let's see here. So GM made a car that I don't remember the brand, and it was back in the 60s, I believe. On bridges, the expansion joints occur by federal mandate at a certain distance. And so when these cars would drive roughly 35 miles over a bridge, they would start to buck and it felt like the wheels were coming off. Of course, the driver would brake, and then the problem would disappear. And what was happening is the frequency of that car in its kind of entirety, when it would drive 35 miles an hour and hit these joints, there was a frequency lineup, and that frequency would just, if it would continue, the car would just fall apart. And so that's kind of the concept behind earthquakes and building. And generally with all the hold downs and all the things we do in construction to earthquake proof, right, in quotes, a home or a building, the idea is to build it to where the frequency is high and your average earthquake is never going to get out that high. That's the concept. Does that cover that, help you out?
Well, how would you do that in practice for the timber frame itself?
For the timber frame itself, doing it in practice, what you're going to do for the, So there's a couple ways to handle that. What you'll see in old buildings is you've got real tall posts with relatively small knee raises. And so when the wind blows or there's an earthquake, you've got a lot of flex between here and here. And so it's more like a bendy tree that goes in the wind rather than like a solid oak. And so this would be an example of building to a lower frequency. Now, if you were going to build to a higher frequency, you would, to give you a dramatic example, you see this in a lot of hospitals and commercial buildings that have retrofit and bracing for earthquake proofing. You might have, something like the retrofit thing would be some big I-beams that have welded plates, or even a scissor, a half lap joint here with your timbers and pegs, your mortise and tenon. That would be an example of a high frequency. That's going to be very rigid and they have a high frequency. Those are kind of your two options. And there is a option that goes back to Oriental style of timber framing, which is no pegs, it's all compression, and it's a complex. What it is it's a complex. If say, let me get this clear here. They have a whole bunch of little pieces that kind of interlock in little U shapes. And they just stack up like this. They're all interlocked. And so when an earthquake comes through, and if some earthquakes, someone previously mentioned moving up and down, well, the building can shift as the ground goes up and down. And these are kind of like what you'd call an adjustable knee brace. And it's all compression. So there's no pegs or anything holding it together. So if things move up and down, it moves with it. And this is also an example of a low frequency type of earthquake thing.
And Mario, the question, he just responded, yes, Japanese joints. So he recognizes those. Perfect. So cool. All right.
All righty.
Good question for Mario.
Thank you, Mario. Great question. So handling big beams on a remote job site, it is possible. They've built huge cathedrals and pyramids and all kinds of things when they didn't have machines, right? You just can hire me and I'll walk inside that wheel, be the crane. So really practically for what we've done when we can't get like a crane or equipment into places, is for lighter beams, 500 pounds or less, there's a material lift where you just kind of crank it up and it's got a tower that goes up. Another way that's really handy is to set up scaffolding so that the scaffolding that the masons use, you set up your towers, and you can get a beam that goes across. And of course, your towers don't have to be spread so far apart. So this beam doesn't have to be super heavy. And then you could attach a come along or a hoist, and you can use that to get your beams up where you need to go. That's one method. Another, there's other methods of kind of walking them up ladders, and a lot of different, it involves a lot of grunting and coordination and such. And you have to make sure that everybody has an escape hole if things start to fall down. People know where they're going to go to stay safe. So equipment's better. But if you have to, your biggest tool by far is the thing between your ears. Even like we talked about, that biggest tool, the biggest takeaway for you could be with this, the biggest tool is between your ears. What tools you're going to buy, what you're going to build, what wall you're going to lean your ladder up against. The biggest tool is here. And whatever it is you run across, your brain's kind of weird. It will do exactly what you want it to do, no more and no less. And so, Mario amigo, tengo una historia. So the way I learned Spanish when I started, this was a couple years before I got introduced to timber framing. You know what I did? I took my phone. I didn't know a lick of Spanish, nothing. Took my phone and I changed the language on my phone to Spanish. And I believe within a week, I could recognize letter groupings. And I say letter groupings because I couldn't say the word, couldn't pronounce it right, nor would I understand it if somebody, what if I understood if someone would have told me it. But I could navigate my phone. Oh, that means those letters together mean missed call. Oh, these letters together means a call or a text, whatever it was. And so that underscores when you're out here doing something where you have to get some kind of weird lift or some kind of big challenge, your brain will do exactly what you ask it to do, no more and no less. Just like it did with the Spanish on my phone. My brain brought it to there and then it quit. Okay, all done. Oh, you need me to do more? Okay, what's up? And that's what will happen if you think, for example, this tower is going to be unsafe. Well, now your brain's here. Oh, you need another option? Okay, well, I guess it's back to work. It's really incredible. Most important tool, for sure. Okay. Okay, good sources for do-it-yourself timber framing tools. Timber Frame HQ. Let me write that down for you. Timber Frame HQ. And you'll find in there, they got a whole review thing on different tools and a great resource for all kinds of timber frame information. Renting tools. I guess I could ask you as the audience, if you had something, would you be comfortable accepting money to rent it out? For myself, the money, no way. I mean, if something breaks, that's kind of the risk. Loaning it to a friend or somebody I know, that's really the only place where I'd be at. And the tools aren't typically widely enough used for rental companies to be interested in owning these because they'll probably collect dust on the shelves. So good luck with that. If the best way to rent is to become your own rental thing and buy it, use it, and sell it, that would be my recommendation. And this last one here, how difficult can these projects be? I don't think I'm the right person to ask. Because once you've done something and done it for a long time, it seems pretty dang simple. I can say that we sent out kits to people, and to me, they're simple as all get out, but I get educated on different ways to mess it up by what happens later. And there's a whole learning curve that I'm blind to it now. I mean, I'm not the person to ask. Our general manager, Josh, he's also kind of the chief sales guy. He really can see things and empathize from a beginner's point of view. I just have trouble getting there myself. So I guess if I was going to give you a rule of thumb, I would say figure out how hard or how much time you think it's going to be, and then just go ×3. That's my best take on it. Okay, I think we're there, guys. So, the biggest tool between your ears, take a step back, make sure you're leaning the ladder up against the right wall, and then look at what tools you need in order to get where you want to go and the process that you like. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here with us today. We'll see you guys on the next one. This might be a vintage video again. This is going to be gone for sure. I'm driving me nuts. Okay. Bye-bye.